Smart and Lazy Story Number 1. Theodore's Empty Backpack. Theodore, what's wrong? You see, it's not always about concepts and extra practice. Sometimes kids actually do know the information, but they don't perform in the test the way that they should. Now, what's the underlying problem? Sometimes we have to shift our attention from the student's unconscious reasoning and develop an understanding of what that thought process is and what leads to this behavior. So what I want to do is I want to tell you a story about Theodore. He's a very bright young boy who just needed a structured environment to study in. So his father hired me to set up some curriculum and to monitor his study habits. And throughout about a year or so, he actually maintained a very steady improvement and stayed ahead of the curriculum. I noticed that he would absorb information very quickly, but quickly divert his attention to other things in the room he was more interested in. He was constantly characterized as smart but lazy, but he was only willing to put in a minimal amount of effort required, and that's what caused that. And both his parents knew it. They had their own strategies that they developed over the years in order to compromise. They both wanted their student to pass, but Dad said that he wanted straight A's. If Theodore brought home B's, those were acceptable as well. But he knew if he aimed high, that if his son brought home something a little lower, that would be okay for him. Mom, on the other hand, had been an average student, but actually owned a very successful business. And so her philosophy was this phrase that I very commonly hear among parents and actually students in academics is C's get degrees. And so with this in mind, Theodore actually brought home a very big mix. It was A's, B's, and C's. And in my opinion, that was actually more reflective upon his interests in those subjects and more likely was related to the teacher's energy and the curriculum and the way that he learned in those classes. And throughout the year, he had very little issue with concepts as long as he found a way to apply them. And we found ways to use his video games and his sports in order to explain things in a better manner for him. I like to believe that every time we sent him off for a test, that we could use a metaphor to say that his backpack was full, meaning that he had all the tools that were necessary in order to succeed. But one day, he actually brought home a D grade, and this was on a subject that we had spent very extensive time reviewing. Both the parents asked me to spend some extra time to review the concepts and to ensure this understanding. But within about 15 minutes, we had actually gone through the entire test. And he redid the entire test, every single problem right in front of me with no issues at all. This was a 50-minute test in school, but he had finished it in a fraction of the time. I checked his answers, there were no errors. I remember this very moment, and I asked him, "What was wrong during the test? I can see that you understood the material here." And when I look back, I realized that asking, "What's wrong?" was the key. Theodore actually broke down to me for a moment and mentioned that his parents had been so busy with work that all the weekend time with family had been missing for the last few weeks. He asked for a little bit of attention at times, but was brushed away because of more important things, such as business. And in this case, by bringing home a D, he had actually gotten yelled at, and he was actually given a little bit more attention. Something that actually indirectly showed love and that his parents cared. You see, his physical backpack was full, but his emotional backpack was actually empty. Theodore had actually unconsciously determined that he wasn't going to get that attention that he wanted, and it resulted in him seeking the only other route that he could find, actually punishment. Unconsciously, he realized that he wasn't going to get his parents' attention unless he pulled off something drastic. Grades mattered to his parents, and so he brought home a bad one. You see, I asked him to tell his parents, but he actually refused. He actually had confided in me, hoping that I would tell his parents for him. And so, after a little bit of bugging and nagging, he actually wouldn't actually talk to his parents, so I did step in, and I spoke with them immediately that night. The conversation was fairly brief, but I explained to them a little bit about their son's thought process. Later on, they spent some family time together that night and later on that weekend. And I'll tell you this, the following tests for that year were all straight A's. So I'll never forget the lesson that I learned here. Sometimes it's not just about concepts and extra practice. Sometimes the kids actually do know the information, but they have other more important things in mind. So what was wrong? I like to say his backpack was empty. And over time I've realized that sometimes there are unconscious reactions that the adolescent mind resorts to. And a few times it'll be based upon love and attention, sometimes missing time with loved ones such as parents, guardians, maybe siblings. Will I get to hang out with mom? Will I get to see dad? Will the trip get canceled? Will other things come up? To some students, their concerns might even be greater than that. It might be of survival. Will there be a place for me to sleep tonight? Will there be food on the table? And when you see these types of questions arise in an adolescent's mind, it's actually more likely that their attention will be diverted. In doing so, grades don't matter as much anymore. Survival, or in this case, love and attention, do matter more to a student. So what this interaction with Theodore actually taught me was that after you look past the grades, you'll actually often find that there are other factors occupying a student's attention. So what I say is check your student's backpack, and then take a moment to check their emotional backpack as well. Maybe you'll find something there that will actually alleviate the academic sides, but sometimes we'll have to dig a little deeper. This is Eric with Exclusive Tutoring San Diego. I am the podcaster here for Smart and Lazy. Keep tuned. I will be putting more of these stories up. And if you have any questions or comments, go ahead and email me at eric@exclusivetutoringsd.com. Have a great day, guys.